Hi, my name is Christian Elliott, and I am a health coach. Excited to have a self-care conversation today.
Hello, sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here.
Hey everybody, it's Pearl Chiarenza, and I'm so excited to have you on our show today and to hear our new title. It's called Self-Care Conversations. And today, one of our guests is part of our new launch of our podcast. We're excited to have him here. And yes, people often ask me, Christian, do you ever have men on this show? And of course we do, because we know we can be inspired and empowered by the men in our lives and the men around us. So I'm so excited to introduce to you guys today my guest, Christian Elliott. And he is a husband and father of 6 homeschooled kids. He has been a full-time in the alternative health space since 2005, logging about 20,000 hours of one-to-one coaching, fitness, nutrition, life, and relationship coaching. He also has a Master of Divinity from Fuller Seminary. A Christian, is also a co-owner of a newly established organization called Healing United, a private membership association focused on helping people detox and heal from a myriad of chronic, often incurable health conditions. I am excited to have a conversation with you today. Welcome to the show, Christian.
Well, thank you for having me, Pearl. It's good to be here.
Same here. So I always like to do this fun little thing, and I always like to kind of go back in time. Oftentimes there's a lot of talk about our inner child and when we're dealing with emotions and our mindset and things like that. And have you healed or not healed your inner child? So I always like to go see what that inner child was like for my guests. So take us back to when you were younger and, think about what we always had those big dreams about. What do I want to be when I grow up? I want to be a doctor. I want to be the president. I want to be a teacher. Like, what was that for you? And how does it correlate to what you're doing today?
Well, I'm not sure exactly the correlation, but what I can say is I, for whatever reason, wanted to be a football player. Thought that would be fun. And I don't know if I had the right parents for that, meaning I'm not the biggest guy. And so football is a pretty big guy sport and brutal sport. So I didn't have, I was fast and I could catch well, but that never really, I didn't have many opportunities to do that. So I think what I liked about that is just the physicality. I liked the option for exercise. I like being under coaches. I like having the opportunity to be pushed and be inspired and to see what I'm made of. Those kinds of things are fun. And so there's something about that overlaps nicely with entrepreneurship, because it really is a self-development course disguised as a way to have time freedom and financial freedom. And that longing to kind of set my own sail or to find a complicated problem and solve it and be part and find something that pushes me to become a better person and to have others around me, that's never left. So maybe that's kind of the through line there.
Yeah, I can see that. My oldest son played football in high school, and he did 1 year in college ball too. So it was what you were describing. I'm like, yeah, he was kind of built like you, but a little bit bigger muscle tone, right? And broad shoulders, and like he had such a great arm and everything. But when you were saying that, I'm like, what was coming to mind was like, especially with the coaching, like the team and, having a team and having, that mindset of health, because when you're playing football, you've got to be somewhat healthy, depending on what position you're playing. You can eat a little bit more, I guess, if you need more pounds kind of thing. But,
Yeah.
You have to have that physical, and then the mindset plays a lot as a coach. I was watching, my husband and I are big football fans. We're big Buffalo Bills fans. So we always watch the stuff after the football game. So this morning we were watching the Thursday highlights from Good Morning Football. And they were saying about, I can't remember the football player for San Francisco, but he was like, he just walked off the field the third quarter. So it's like, I don't want to play anymore. And I looked at him, I go, well, that's a great team building. That's a great team member you want on your team. That's a great mindset. Once things get tough, I just quit. And so, while you were talking about that, I was like, yeah, that totally corresponds to what you're doing. Because I know you and I had a conversation before coming on the show, and I see how that correlates to what, that mindset of what a football player is to what you're doing today. And we're going to talk a little bit about resiliency too. I mean, as a football player and that mindset, you have to be resilient. You have to take a lot of hits to get back up, and and that thing. So I think for me, I see definitely the correlation. I think for me, being younger, I wanted to be a teacher. I wanted to be this elementary school teacher, and I wanted to inspire kids. And so I didn't have the guidance to go off to college. My parents too did not have a great help with in that area. So, and I didn't have great back when I went to school and where I went to school, I didn't have great guidance counselors. So I kind of went on the school of hard knocks, and grew up, and I've been with my husband for almost 40 years now. But now here I am today, and I'm like, I am teaching and I'm inspiring. It's just I'm doing my age group now instead of the little ones, and
Right.
it's a lot of fun to think back when I was little, and I love having my guests look back and watch how sometimes they don't think it correlates, and then I'll go like, well, wait, and they're like, oh yeah, I guess I see that. So thanks for letting us talk to your little the little child that was in you for a little bit. I love that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. So tell us, okay, everybody's heard me talk about you homeschool 6
Mhm,
kids, right?
mhm.
And you've been doing this since before the pandemic, right?
Yeah, we've been my daughter is 17, she'll be 18 in March, and she has been homeschooled the whole way through. So, yeah, we've been at this since the beginning, and it was my wife's or sorry, it was my idea, and my wife was gracious enough to try it out. And she's like, "Okay, if I don't screw up 1st grade, I might consider 2nd grade." And we just haven't looked back. It's been one of the most rewarding things that we've done, and she does the lion's share of it. So I can't say there's not a lot of we in there, but I get to be the dad and participate as I'm able. But yeah, it is a chance to give kids an extended childhood. It is a chance to redeem 2 generations at once because we're learning along with them, and it's also a chance to um, watch them bond with each other and relate to peers. And they have that the idea that homeschoolers don't have a social life is hysterical to me because my kids have so many friends, and they're likely to be kids who want to come home when they're after they graduate. And that to us is part of what success looks like. It's not just outsourcing education and hoping for the best, but it's saying, you know what, let's do our part to give them an education that in many ways is far surpasses what my wife and I received. And we have enjoyed the ride and can't imagine doing it any other way now.
And I like what you said too. I was thinking because I have many friends that say the same thing you do. Like, and I've heard the story. Well, if they're homeschooled, they're sheltered, and they don't get to the experience of all that. And I've watched my friends, bring their kids to the high school to be parts of bands and things like that. And
Mhm.
so, tell the listeners like that maybe considering something like that. What would you say would be some of the top 3 things to consider when you're thinking about homeschooling? And then I'll have a question to follow up with that.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to homeschool, it's as much what you value because the beauty of homeschool is you can make it what is important to you as a family, but you also get to cater to the interests and the abilities or skills of your own children. And that our kids are involved in so many different things, but they're not all involved in the same things. And it's do you notice different aptitudes, or you're not stuck within the frame of everyone has to be able to perform this test at this time at this age. And some kids excel and they'll be ahead of the curve, and other ones take longer to learn a particular skill, or learning to read may take a little bit longer. And you just are able to adjust to them. And it's got its challenges like anything else. There's no easy pass in life, but this for us, when you get a reasonable level of systems down, and my wife jokingly calls our homeschool the Elliott School of Occasional Learning, and the recognition that the system forces us into tight boxes and hour breaks and schedules, and we just get to not live under that. We have our own routines, but we adapt to a family, and we get to pass on to our kids the things that are stuff that you don't it doesn't fall in the education system, faith and health and finance and relationships and kind of like the major important aspects of life that the school system just doesn't do much with. We get to invest that in our kids. And so there's a level at which we have a community. It's called classical conversation. So we are surrounded by other families doing it, but you do get to make it your own. And that having a community with you is probably the most important thing if you're considering homeschooling. If you're trying to just stay in your house and do it, it's a lot harder. But when you have other families invested in and able to speak life to your own kids or to teach them, because sometimes even like between spouses or between parents and children, there's a difficulty of, yeah, but your family, so you can't say that. But when you have other tutors and you have other peers and they inspire each other, I've never seen such a group of inspired kids. as what we have with homeschool. So I'd say don't do it by yourself. If you can plug into community, it is such a better way to do it.
I think that also, like what you're saying, what you said too in there, is it correlates to, you know, what is they're not offering in school, faith, health, finance. Like we don't have that. I remember, when my kids started school. I remember when I went to school, we had home ec and all those things. I had to learn to sew, and it's like I still can't sew to this day, but I try to learn it in school. But then we also, when my son was in school, when he started school, by the time he hit senior in high school, they weren't doing it anymore. They were doing how to balance checkbook. Now they don't
Mm.
even talk about that stuff. How do you balance your account and stuff like that? And so I like how, yes, it correlates over into real life, because I think that was one of the things that our oldest would say to us. It's like, I go to school to learn all this, but where am I applying it in real life? Like this stuff here that I'm learning. I'm like, wow, that's, it's great points that they were bringing home. And this is before, I really knew anything about homeschool, and the part what you said too about community. We need to learn in our life. Like we sometimes in families and public school, they get the social, but there's so much social that they are exposed to that's not good for them. And then it's not
Right.
addressed. We talk about the bullying
Hmm.
and things like that. And then the stuff that is good, we don't necessarily try to bring everybody up to get, not that everybody's got to be the same, but give that equal opportunity to have that learning opportunity for some. So many people get lost, and having community and learning that, like learning all of those, because that faith, health, and finance are such an important part of our adult life. And we're not
Hmm.
teaching that, we're not setting that up. And teaching them how to, go through the struggles of it. There are struggles, and having a community. I like what you said. Community is a big thing. I mean, that's why, I have a community for my group of people that I coach. It's like, yeah, I can help and guide you, but I want you to hear from other people, not just from me.
Yeah.
This is what I know and I teach, but there's people within our community that can, empower and pour into you, and having community and teaching that, to our youth is so important, because it's a bigger perspective. It's learning.
Hmm.
It's also going back to, I'll bring up again the word resilience. It's like having, people to help you to feel resilient, that when you feel like things aren't going well, you can go to some of your community and ask for help, or ask for, advice, or even pour into somebody else. I know, like when we lost my son, I've been talking about 2 years ago in a tragic car accident, I had started this community called the Shiro League. I did it during COVID because I saw so many women, and that's mostly my area expertise, but they were like going, oh my gosh, my kids are home and I have to school them at home, and I have no clue how to do that, and then I have to be home all day with my kids and my family, and oh, by the way, my spouse or partner's home all day. I called it, I need a Calgon take me away moment, but I'm not allowed to leave my house. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, I feel like I have to do something. And Zoom was, really taking off, and I was like, let's just create a 30-day self-care challenge. And so I just created this sitting on my couch one evening, and kind of just put it together on my own before Chat GPT was any around to say, hey, if I want to do this, help me out. But I
Hmm.
just put this together where every day we did something for ourselves. And every Sunday evening we would get together and talk about, how was it? Where did you struggle? Where did you have success in balancing everything you're doing, spinning the plates? And at the end of 30 days, I had been holding retreats for about 3 years prior to COVID. So they were always asking at the end of our retreats, what can we do to stay connected? And I didn't really, shame on me. The hindsight was 2020, should have created a group to keep us together. So at the end of this, 30-day challenge, I'm like, well, let's do a group. And, you guys, we were talking about how we've all become, what we were calling sheroes of our lives. I was talking to them about becoming stronger, learning how to become happier, learning how to become empowered, learning how to become radiant and original in the things we want to do and learn to do. And they're like, yeah, we should just have something like that. I'm like, okay, that's awesome. So we created the Shiro League. And so, that was during COVID, and fast forward July of 22, we've been meeting every Sunday evening on Zoom. It's not recorded. You can come sitting in your bed if you want to, have a cup of coffee, have a glass of wine, whatever it was for you. And so when I lost my son, one of the local Shiros, like she was at my doorstep. I called her right away. I'm like, this, oh my gosh, it's like, I don't even think I hung up the phone, and she was at my doorstep. So, so having that community is so powerful. And it's helped my husband and I and my other son, Nate, like walk this journey of what grief is like, and that we still can live after. We can still be, this resiliency kind of life. So talk to us about your Shiro story. I always like to also know, what's your Shiro your story. I know when you filled out the form, you talked about, it's those that are listening, we do this little form to help us like prepare for the show. And I know that you talk about how you've been, an entrepreneur for 20 years and calibrating your lifestyle. So talk to us about how you play the long game.
Oh man, there's a lot of different ways to do it, and recognizing if you want to be an entrepreneur, and definitely if you want to be your own, boss or be the one that puts food on the table and earns a living, and you can't just have spurts of activity followed by lulls of doing nothing. And so you really do have to calibrate to realism. You have to calibrate to, I can't cheat my sleep indefinitely. I can't disproportionately work and ignore my family and have a life that I'm proud of. I can't throw my health to the wind and not take care of myself if I want to be able to show up and be present and focused and do deep work. So it really does temper how aggressively you push in a given area if you're going for whole life success. And that's really my, I'm probably one of the wealthiest guys in everything except money. We make a living, but I'm rich in relationships and in faith and in health and in community and and my family. And that to me is more what success is. And so to have richness across the important aspects of life, you have to have an operating philosophy that says, where does my time go and what am I willing to say no to? And I have no ambition to ever be a billionaire. I don't want to go through whatever those people would go through to get there. I'd much rather have kids that I get to hang out with. I'd much rather have adventures. I'd much rather be able to do things to take care of myself. And it comes at a cost. The time has to come from somewhere. And so if you're going to play the long game here, then yeah, we do need the ability to have some way to categorize what's important, to figure out what's the minimum effective dose of taking care of my health or of spending time with family, or because you could overdo any of them. But once you kind of get, okay, well, this is about how much time it takes, then you can say, well, how much is left? And with 6 kids and a business, I don't do as many extracurricular things as I might do if I wasn't in that scenario. But gosh, I wouldn't change it. It's exactly what I signed up for, and it's not without challenges, but it is highly rewarding, and I sleep well at night because I'm not worried about many things at all, and that is earned over time, and it's the continual refinement of your personal philosophy that helps you identify what's really important, and then what it would take to get there. So those would be my comments on that.
Yeah, no, it's so true. You talk about the no. That's my big thing about where you say no in your life that you can show up. Like, I like what you said, the whole life success. Like where I put down, where does your time go and where do you say no to? And so oftentimes we struggle with that. And you're right. I'm the same way. Like I've got many, I've been in the circles where, high income earners and I watch from afar and I'm like, you don't really see their families around too much. You don't see their kids. I mean, I know of, there's one that I know of. I'm not say the name because I don't want to plug them, but there is one that I do see interaction with, having their daughter with them. However, I also watch that the focus seems to be so much on the end game of money, or, it's not really in my mind. I was like, man, this is a great opportunity to take the kids that are following her and be like, this is how you can have fun,
Mm-hmm.
and not have to be honed into the end game is I have to have big money when I get out of school, and so, and I like what you said, categorize what's important in our lives. Oftentimes we forget to do that. I love when I start coaching with my clients. One of the first things I work on with them, and I tell them, I'm like, listen, you're not going to like me the first 6 weeks we're going to work together because I'm going to ask you something tough to do. And you're going to be like, oh, I got this. And I'm going to tell you, you ain't got it because I
Mm-hmm.
ask them, I want you to tell me 10 things that bring you joy. And they're like, oh, I can, and I'm like, and it can be your kids, don't get me wrong, but it needs to be other than your kids, And if it is your kids, like, I want to know why. Like, what about each one of your children bring you joy? They're like, each one? I'm like, yeah. And so they'll give it to me. And I'm like, okay, so what about that brings you joy? And they'll tell me something else. Like I had a hairdresser. She's like, well, I love cutting hair. I'm like, well, that's great. I can go to the $5 barbershop up the street, get my hair cut. Like, why do I come to you? Like, why does that somebody come and sit in your chair? And she looks at me, she goes, oh, you want to know that? I'm like, yeah, like
Mm-hmm.
why somebody sitting in your chair makes you feel good. And then as we walk through it, she's like, well, they come in, they sit and they've had a bad day. I'm like, excuse me. I'm like, okay, so they've had a bad day. Some of us have bad days, but what about them sitting in your chair can make it better? And so when we finish, she's like, Wow, Pearl. It took her like 3 weeks to do that one item. And she's like, it really came down to that they walk in the door, whether they've had a bad day or not, they walk in and, they feel like, oh my gosh, my hair is frumpy and, I don't look so great now. And she's just, yeah, they come every so many weeks, but they get to that point, they're like, oh, I got to go get my hair done. And then they'll sit down there and she's like, and Pearl, you tell your hairdresser everything. I'm like, oh yeah, I know. I tell my hairdresser everything. And she's like, so it's like they come in and have this therapy session and they dump all their woes and then leave with a smile on their face. I said, so what brings you joy is them sitting in your chair and you can make them feel better and beautiful as they walk out the door. She's like, yes. I'm like, she goes, why wasn't that so simple for me to answer? And I'm like, because we don't think about it in that tense. We don't think about what's the real big part of the joy. I'm like, listen, my kids bring me joy too. I'm like, I can tell you why each one. I'm like, my younger son, Nate, he brings me joy because he's such an old soul. I can sit down and have conversations with him about anything and he'll talk politics or whatever. And he's respectful. He's very adamant about his thoughts and we're happy to hear it. But we can banter back and forth with good conversation. I said, but he's also smart. And like, he's smarter than I am. He could build 3 computers in like 2 days. And I'm like going, well, how'd you do that? I said, so those kind of things about him bring me joy, so I tell you that I tell them, you've got to figure out what's important, because if you just go through life and I like how you said, it's not about the money, it's about the balance, about like you call it the whole life success. And, it's sometimes it's hard for us to do that inventory of,
Mhm.
what does that look like and what or who do I have to remove from my circle of influence so that I can have that whole life success.
Yeah.
And yeah, we want to talk on that?
Oh, I certainly can. Yeah, the concept of that, I think I got it from Darren Hardy, but it's just the idea that you can be really successful at one thing and be completely unfulfilled. That's really what the tabloids are. It's somebody who's got super high success in one area, and we just found out is they're not perfect either, and that's why their disheveled hair picture is what's on the cover of the whatever tabloid it is, and it's a recognition that if you're financially successful, but you have no friends and your health stinks, that won't feel successful. And flip it any way you want. If you're an Olympic athlete with a gold medal and nobody likes you, or you're broke, that doesn't feel successful either. So it's recognizing that you can have myopic success in one area, but if you don't have the breadth of it relationally, financially, vocationally, and even spiritually, then life doesn't feel successful because you're stuck chasing one thing, hoping or expecting that it will fulfill you in the other ways. And it takes an ability to step back and yes, there are seasons to run hard after one thing. But if that's the focus of life and to the detriment of the other things and your marriage falls apart, you won't feel successful at the end of that. You'll just feel, shoot, I missed it. And it's so much more fun to go through life if you've had that epiphany earlier because you have the opportunity and time to correct that. And even if you haven't, and you make it to the top financially, and you realize your kids don't want to talk to you, and your health is in shambles, at least you have the money to start working on it, and you can make some hard decisions and change. But yeah, that operating principle coming to me at an earlier stage of life was an important aspect that I think has kept me from overreaching in any one area to the neglect of the other important areas.
Yeah, I like how you said too, like you're right, the tabloids, we see the deceival, and then they do one thing wrong. It's like we're just gonna, this big attack across them. I used to when I lived in California, where I worked at this bank I was working at the time. Sometimes we'd have some celebrities come in, and they're just everyday people, and they just come
Mhm.
in and people. And I remember some of the girls would like all Google over it, and they'd just walk up to my counter. I'd be like, "So how can I help you?" Like I would not recognize, I knew who they were, but it was like, oh, and one of them one time, I won't say their name, but came up to me and said, "Oh my gosh, when I come in here, I always come to you. Do you notice that?" I said, "Yeah, I appreciate that." She was like, "But I only come to you because you don't worry about my stardom. You make me feel like I'm a normal person making a bank, doing something at the bank." I'm like, "Well, thank you." So it's so true. It's like, part again, like self-care. One of the things, in self-care is like at the, again, we talk about joy. Now we're going to talk about afterlife for a second. And that is,
Mhm.
I'll say to my my clients, where are you showing up? Like we just talked a little bit ago, like where are you saying no to so you can show up for yourself? Because you've got to take care of you first so you can be part of that whole life process with your family and everything else that's important to
Mhm.
you. And so I often say, so if for some reason tomorrow, we don't have the honor of having you here, what will your 10 closest family members and friends say that they saw you do for your self-care? And they'll look at me and I'm like, if you can't think of 10 things, we got some work to do because they should each be able to say they saw you. And it's not your titles you wear. It's not volunteering. It's not, your mom and dad or whatever that is. It's what did you do for you? And like for me, people will say my neighbors will say, I walk by, I see Pearl sitting on the front porch swing every morning. She's writing or she's just having a cup of tea. They'll say they see me go for a staycation. I live in Florida, so I'll go get a hotel for an overnight stay or something. They'll say that
Mhm.
I did stuff like that, but they'll also say that, because self-care is not selfish. They'll also say, hey, they saw me eating sushi with my older son because, he said, Mom, I want to go for sushi. And I knew that meant that he wanted to have a conversation about something in his life. And it's like, yeah, let's go, or they'll saw me at a movie with my other son, Nate, because that was his words of, can we talk? Can we go to a movie and can we talk? So those kind of things are things that they'll say that they could see about me. And so it's really important because again, like, we're saying it's not titles, it's how we're showing up in our life, how are we going through and overcoming challenges that come in our life. And so that which leads me to I want to talk about like what you do with your clients. Tell us a little bit about what you do with your coaching and then also the private membership association.
Okay, yeah. Well, so our private membership association is called Healing United, and we set it up as a PMA specifically because of the times we live in and the need to be able to speak freely about things that actually help. And there's protections that a PMA gives us where we're not in the linguistic handcuffs that a lot of professions get, and we can have a private, off the record conversation as part of our membership. And so, where that became relevant for us is in the realm of health, where there's a lot of censorship these days, where the things that actually tend to be the most impactful or the things that help the most um, are not you're not allowed to talk about. You get your videos taken down, you get censored, or you get fact checkers coming after you. And so we wanted to just be able to like, can we just have level-headed, fair conversations, and let's do this officially off the record. And so what became it was a sticky widget for us because we had people that we worked with who had been injured or had adverse events from the COVID shots, and so we had to figure out how to talk about all the options they had for healing in a way where it wasn't going to put our doctor's medical license on the line in order to try out what might be the things that are most effective. And so that started with that was the impetus to get organized. And then really, as we started studying the problem of what's in these things and what are we trying to get out of the body that's causing this problem, we realized we were onto a much bigger issue, which is just toxicity in general. In toxicity, if you're looking at the health statistics from say 1930s to today, we went from about 7.5% chronic disease to 6 out of 10. So 6 out of 10 people are now sick with a chronic disease. And the only thing that offers a compelling, definitive reason why that's happening is we have been poisoned for over the last several centuries, or not centuries, decades. And that poisoning is accumulating in our body. And so it's manifesting a whole host of different types of diseases, but it's still the same root problem. And if we can figure out how does the body purge things that don't belong in there? The average body burden was about 700 chemicals in the year 2006. So just imagine what it is today. There's been about 80,000 chemicals made in the last 100 years that are new to nature, that never existed before. And the bodies are not designed to handle that. And so while the CDC will tell you that it's smoking and drinking and poor nutrition and lack of exercise, all of those have actually increased and gotten better. We've done better at diminishing cigarettes and alcohol, and we've done better at eating more healthfully and moving more according to their own stats. So the idea that this dramatic rise in sickness comes from us being too lazy to do the right thing is a red herring. They're directing our attention away from what's really the problem. And so we just said we need to be able to focus on that problem, have honest conversations about it. Because if you've got a sick fish swimming in dirty water, you have two options. You can medicate the fish or you can change the water. And we're interested in cleaning the water. So if we clean the tank, the fish gets better. And that's essentially a lot of the work we do is just trying to help people heal because that it's removing the burden that is gunking up their engine And if you can, so we kind of have two major lanes. There's the unburden, which is kind of the purify, and there's the empower. It's empower the body to function using a whole host of modalities that lets it flourish. And that's simplified health so beautifully for us because we don't need to play biochemical whack-a-mole for every single chemical that's out there. We need a new thing to swallow. We just need a framework that says the body's the only one that's going to be able to sort all this out. There's too many complex variables. It's impossible math to account for all the chemicals and all the lifestyle factors. So let's just work at the simplest framework. So that's a kind of a short version of what sometimes takes longer to teach. But once you get the simple framework and you're realizing that it really doesn't matter which disease condition you have, it doesn't matter what way your body's breaking down or what headache or brain fog or joint pain or digestive woes. We have a toxicity problem, at least at a minimum. And there's no downside to addressing that and then empowering it to heal. And so that's been some of our fun transformative work. And we realized we have 3 different types of audiences I can tell you about if you want. But there's a simple approach, and figuring out the right starting point for somebody helps us figure out what kind of path they would go on. And we really do personalize these around people's health. So their health status, their budget, how much they can afford to spend, and their lifestyle. Like what would this imply in a real life if we asked you to do these things? And we help figure out as strategists how to get this person to move forward. And that's just a really unique thing. We're kind of turning healthcare on its head at this point. And so that's the fun work that I get to do on the regular these days.
You just called what I was going to say. I was just going to say you're turning healthcare on its head. So you just,
All of healthcare is reactionary.
Yeah.
We're not.
And it's so true because I mean, I think you and I touched on this when we were talking before doing the show, but we go in our doctor's office, we get 15 minutes with them, and that's just not enough time. And then you get them like once every so many months, and if it's blood work, you get that twice a year. It's like, I learned years ago when I went on this journey to become healthier that I have to take control of it. It's my body, and I'll do with it what I want to do. And my husband came a little bit begrudgingly along with me, and would fight me some on things, but I just was like, I remember going into I went into a doctor's office, and I just didn't feel right coming out. And I had started on my health journey. I'm like, I got to do something. So I just started looking at what was I eating? What can I change? And, I went from one extreme to another. I found a program that was no fat, no carbs, no diet. I mean, strictly all protein and vegetables and such. And which was great. It really helped me kickstart it. But I was like, I can't sustain this lifestyle. This is just not a lifestyle that can sustain. So how do I need to incorporate others? And that's why I really learned about more the whole food eating, having the right stuff on my plate, and having, the 6 different meals throughout the day. And it's helped me sustain, where I'm at. And then also the emotional part of it. I was doing really well. And when my son passed away 2 years ago, I just was like, it was almost like I tell my friends there's the day before, the day after. And the day after was like, I forgot everything I did the day before, like health wise and everything. I just went, like, I'm just going to eat my feelings and just dive right into that. And it took me probably a good 6 months to realize, Pearl, this is not what you want to do. You don't need to be joining him this soon, So I was like, I got to get back to what I was doing the right way. And so that's, I keep living that lifestyle. And, my husband's getting ready to have 2 double hip surgeries, which I, for 5 years, been saying, your doctor is wrong. You need to have surgery. And finally, the doctor's like, we switched doctors. He's like, why are you even here? You should have had surgery 3 years ago. I'm like, hello, So, but, taking control of that. And so I remember, like, it's a funny story is we both go to the same doctor's office. I see the husband and he sees the wife. And the husband, I walked in when I first started joining them. I was like, okay, here's everything I take for my vitamins. Here's how I eat. Here's, the kind of blood work I want to make sure we're taking. He just sat back and looked at me and goes, you've done your research. I go, listen, I know you only get so much time with me, so I want my time to be maximized, right? And then he asked me, when was your last mammogram? I go, I don't do mammograms. I do thermographies. He's like, wow. He's like, okay. So he learned me like right away for the past 9-10 years that we've been going to him now. He's like, okay, he answers my questions based on what he needs. So I had to go see his wife one time because I just wasn't feeling good. And I couldn't get rid of this cold, and everything I was doing just wasn't working. So he wasn't available. So I got on his wife's schedule, and I walked in, and she saw me for when I was coming in. She's like, I'm looking at your blood work, and I noticed you're not taking, I can't remember what it was, XYZ, something. I think it was my cholesterol or something. And I'm like, I eat really well. And she goes, sometimes some of us just can't process it. You should really be on something. And I just looked at her like with this stare on my face, right? She's like, I know. You're going to go talk to my husband about this, aren't you? I said, yes, doctor, I'm sorry. So when I saw him like about 6 weeks later for my checkup, he's like, about a couple months ago, you were a conversation at home at the dinner table. I go, I was? He's like, yeah, you saw my wife. And she was like, she didn't want to do anything I said. And he's like, why do you think she comes to me? Where my husband, I went with him one time to go see her because he stopped taking the vitamins I had him on. And I'm like, you're not taking these vitamins. That's why you're starting to have some of this downhill stuff. I had, and I'm like, you need to take care of your body. So I went in with him to see her, and she's like, so you're not usually here with him. I said, I go, yeah, I know. I said, he stopped taking the vitamins, and it's really bothering me, and I can see a difference. And she's like, well, Pearl, I don't really believe in vitamins. And I was like, okay, I just lost it. So I just walked out with him like, whatever. But funny story is, here we are full circle. About probably 2 months after that, he's like, I think I need to take those vitamins. I gotta go, yeah, I think that might help those joints a little bit, so, but we have to take control. We really, we don't have that time. And like you said, sitting down and having a strategy and walking through that is just so important. So I know you talked about the 3 types of people you help. Will you review that with us?
Yeah, sure. So, by the way, don't get me started on thermography or cholesterol lowering medications, or I'll rant for too long. But when it comes to, yeah, the people we help, we realize there's kind of 3 main categories. There's the first, what we kind of call the health optimizer. It's somebody who maybe is doing a lot of things right. They're typically exercising, they're eating fairly well, they have stable relationships, and they're typically high capacity people. But they're typically in the 40s plus window, and they're starting to feel some aches and pains, and I need to get back in front of this, and I want to be proactive, maybe do some sort of cleanse. And those people love just a good plan, and you point them in the right direction, and then you just let them go, and they're very disciplined with it. And then there's our middle category, what we call the weary warrior, and they're somebody who has, they probably know a lot. They have kind of the knowing doing problem from time to time. They have things like, I know to exercise, or I've had history of taking care of my diet, or on and on. But life has kind of handed them some sort of setback. They're in a stressful loop. They are beat down by complexity, and their margin is getting thinner, and they have urgency or will to work at something, but it's got to be precise, and it needs to be something that they can execute, and have some level of accountability and handholding that goes with it, because that they're just their margin isn't very big. And then the third category is what we call our wounded warrior. And that's somebody who typically maybe doesn't know as much about health, or they're on multiple medications. They have a disease condition. They have probably a lot of even emotional things in their past. And so there's a much longer way to go. They've got probably excess weight and a lot of pain and so on. And so that I can't fix that in 8 weeks. I need a longer runway to be able to really do what we call holistic triage, to look at the breadth of where are these problems coming from. And when we think toxicity, we don't just think chemicals, we think mental and emotional toxins. We think thought toxins and story toxins. And those can, as much as anything, be the impediment to somebody's healing. And so we have a much more holistic view that we take with the weary warrior and the wounded warrior, where we're looking at their life and their mental, emotional state, as well as their physical state. And for somebody that's more in the wounded category, we just help them calibrate. We've got significant changes to make. There's 1,000 things we could do. We're not going to try to do them all today, but we collaborate on what are the most needle moving things we could do, of everything we could work on. Maybe where are you most motivated to work on it? And sometimes you get silly, easy wins. If somebody's like, I had a client who was drinking Diet Mountain Dew, and none of his doctors, I don't know how many doctors he had 13 medications. None of them knew that artificial sweeteners impacted your blood sugar, which was blindingly obvious to me. I just took that away, and his blood sugar went down. So sometimes you get simple things where they didn't know. And it's one of 100 things that you change over time that slowly transform them into an unrecognizable person. And so wherever people come to us, one of the things we do is we ask people to kind of go through an application process to figure out what their starting line is. And then we collaborate with them on, does this make sense? And does this feel like the most appropriate place to start? And from there, we do an onboarding to just build out, what would your program be? And then we have support calls, depending on which program you're in, up to 6 days a week. There's a call you can get on that are themed around nutrition or fitness or habits or whatever it is that you are looking for. And that touch point of accountability, nobody can come into our program and say, I didn't have enough support. There's plenty of it. And then it's just a matter of facing yourself and working out changes over time. But man, is it fun work. So those are really the three categories we have for people that come to us.
As you were saying, I'm like, man, I can remember when I was part of each one of those categories and how the needle can move
Right.
sometimes too, right?
Yeah.
Like what I was saying about my son, my needle moved drastically backwards, and
Mm.
and all that. And when you said soda, I kind of took a jump back. I when 2000, I think it was somewhere around 2008, 2009, I was sitting in church. We were getting ready to have giving up something for Lent, and I was like, okay, God, if I'm going to give anything up, I have to give up Diet Coke. I have to
Mm.
give up Diet Coke. I was drinking not one, but two 2-liter bottles of Diet Coke a day. That was like
Whoa.
my coffee. I was like, I kept telling myself, I have to give this up. I have to give this up. So I was like, okay, if I can give up Diet Coke for Lent, I will never go back. So I was like, I'm
Mm.
all in, right?
Nice.
So I went all in, but I went from there to I would bring my son to middle school and I go by McDonald's and they have the best sweet tea, right? So and I love a good Southern sweet tea. So I was replacing my Diet Coke with sweet tea. In my head, I'm going, I'm not having that. So about halfway through Lent, I'm like going, this is silly because I'm just putting a different kind of sugar in my body that I was trying to give up from Diet Coke. So I was like,
Hmm.
okay, no more sweet tea. So I went straight to unsweet tea, and all that. You're right. It was like a big, people are like, what have you done differently? I'm like, I just took Diet Coke out of my day. Like at that
Hmm.
point, I wasn't even on like the healthy part of eating. I was just like, I just took it out. And they're like, really? And like, I never went back. And I remember Easter had come up. We used to have a place in South Carolina near Myrtle Beach. We'd gone to Myrtle Beach and we were driving home the day before Easter and our car broke down in Savannah. So we stopped and we had a cousin that was there doing training. He's part of the border patrol. He was training for border
Hmm.
patrol. So I was like, well, let's go have dinner with Chris. So we all go out to dinner and the boys were having a bottle of root beer and I had ordered a beer and I thought I was grabbing the beer because it looked just like the root beer. And I grabbed the root beer and I was like, oh, this is disgusting. I was like, this is horrible beer. My husband looks at me and goes, you're drinking root beer. I'm like, oh, this is disgusting. At that point, I looked to my kids, I go, enjoy that root beer. You'll get no more of that anymore in your life. And I like took
Wow.
away, my kids are like, Mom, it took away our pop. We call it pop. Mom took away our pop. I'm like, yeah.
Hmm.
So the only time they would get it is if they went out without me to the movies. And I remember one time, we were going to the movies. It was probably about a couple years later after all this. And my younger son, he would make what he called suicide drinks at the movie theater. Do you know what that is? The
Ah.
suicide drink is they pour in the cup one of every pop
Oh,
that's
yes.
on there. And I
Yes,
was
that
like,
sounds
he's doing
gross.
this. I'm like going, what are you doing? He looked at me, goes, you're not supposed to see when we go to the movies. You're telling me I'm allowed to get one thing that's not on the good list, and this is my one thing. I'm like, yeah, but that's like. He goes, I know they call it suicide, Mom.
Oh,
But I was like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, but it's so I took that away. I also took away as I started eating healthier. I was like. I was the mom who would give my kid the Pop Tart going out the door, right? And it was like,
Mm.
and when I learned how much sugar was in a Pop Tart, my younger son, if he was listening right now, he'll shoot me. He would eat a chocolate chip Pop Tart or a s'mores Pop Tart. And when I looked up how much sugar was in there one day, I was like, as soon as these Pop Tarts are gone, he's getting no more. So he's like, I want a Pop Tart. I went, nope, here, you can either have the sugar. And I would pour all the sugar that's in. I took the equivalent of the sugar in a Pop Tart, put it in a bowl. You can have this, or you can have something that's this. Like I gave him like eggs or something. He's like, I'm not eating that sugar. I go, yeah, right. So I stopped buying Pop Tarts. Now he's adults. I know he gets Pop Tarts here or there. But, it's funny, but it's so true. It's like you go through these. I love that you named them too, the Wounded Warrior and the weary, the Weary Warrior too. It's so true in our lifetime. And like you said, doctors don't know because they don't always ask all the questions that need to be asked because they just got that little window. And like
Yeah.
I think like you've talked before where you have doctors that will refer people to you. And I
Hmm.
love too, like I have therapists that refer people to me because they're like, I can't sit with them for only so long, Pearl. And I know the work that you do. I know how you delve into their life with them and help them make changes. And so I think it's important if you're listening to us to know that these kind of things that we're talking about, these are things that can help you build that resilience in your life, help you overcome, challenges in your life. Like, losing a child, it's a journey I don't wish to anybody to become my friend in because it's not a
Mm.
community that I want to be in, but having a community for anything that you're going through in life is important because it does help us navigate life. It helps us go through these ebb and flows, these ups and downs, and and have that support. And I just think it's powerful work that you guys are doing. I love that you're doing that. I love the homeschooling story you share with us too. And I hope the listeners, if you want to learn more, Christian, tell everybody how they can get in touch with you. We're also going to put everything
Sure.
in the show notes too.
Okay, well, thank you for that. You can find us at healingunited.today, which it's not .com. So healingunited.today. We wanted some urgency. Let's get on with it already in our URL. So healingunited.today is where you can find us and our different coaching programs. We've got 3 different ones, and if you've anything resonated with you today and you just want to have a chat, on the top right, you can just click a button that says request a consultation, and that's just where you fill out the application, and then we get to know you. So it's a 45, 60-minute conversation, just a chance to see if we can help and if we are a fit for what you do. So that's the easiest way to follow us. We're also on social if you want to check that out. But I also have a podcast on there you can find as well called Deconstructing Conventional, which is my delight to just pick up the microphone and talk to smart people about where we've made some wrong turns in our thinking about health. So all of that is at healingunited.today.
So you guys heard that there. We'll put in the show notes. You'll be able to click and follow and everything, and learn more about how you too can live that whole life success in your world. And I was so honored to have you with us today in the conversation and enjoy this conversation. I think this is stuff we could talk about for hours if we get
Yes.
really delve into health stuff. I was like you, like we could talk about. I actually met the way I learned about thermographies because I actually had my office in where one of the original members who helped bring thermography to the forefront was teaching and
Nice.
training others to do thermography. So I was always
Nice.
blessed. I always got to be the guinea pig student. So I always got really great, got my test like very often, but I still go get my thermography over there with her. So I
Good
love
job.
this conversation, and we'll probably have you back on again to do more. But as I told you before, and everybody, I forewarned Christian that we do have our Better Life, Better Questions cards. So I'm going to shuffle these. You're going to tell me when to stop, Christian, and then we're going to have you answer the
Oh,
question. So here we
yeah.
go. Tell me when to stop.
Right about there.
All right. So your question says, are you being true to yourself?
Oh, that's easy to affirm. Yes, there's not much. I guess I don't see the value in pretentiousness or pretending or imagining I'm someone different than I am. So yeah, I'm true to myself in that I don't imagine myself to be someone I'm not, and I also aspire to be someone better than I am now. So I'm constantly working at how I can become that person. And so, yeah, that to me, that's as much being true to yourself as anything. It's following your interests and staying humble and staying curious. And I hope people can affirm that I exude that. So yeah, I think I would say yes to that.
That is awesome. Yeah, I love what you said too about always trying to do better, like be better than I was yesterday. What can I do
Yeah.
differently is something that I always like to try to do to be true to myself. And I'm very big about boundaries. I have, in fact, right now I have a family member who she's going through some pretty severe stuff. She's on a recovery journey, and she didn't quite do the first round the way she wanted to. And she came back and I said, I was all in for you. And this time I'm all in on my hours. So if I'm not
Mm.
free, you're not going to get me, And so I'm one of those people that I will give you. And sometimes the people pleaser in me wants to give more, but I've learned over time that I have to be true to myself. I have to keep to my boundaries. And like even
Mhm.
her outside family that are not local here that are trying to help, I tell them every day, here's what I have for you today. If you need me, this is where you can get me and when you can get me. If it's not in this time, then you'll have to wait till I come back to you, So it's really, really important, I think, too, like what we're saying to that whole life success is to, set those boundaries for ourselves and, look, and like you said, what can I do better to be true to myself? So I love
Yeah.
that you share that with us.
Well, thanks. Yeah, you're modeling to other people a value that they probably would value too. It's taking yourself seriously enough to have some boundaries. So
Yeah.
good job.
100%. Thank you. All right. So I want to thank everybody for listening with us today to our Self-Care Heroes podcast. And also remind you that as you come into this world, you are this oyster that's a little rough on the outside, but as you start opening up that shell, you are going to find your inner pearl to greatness. And I hope today you go out and had some great listening skills to take with you and live your whole life success story. So thank you so much for joining us, Christian.
Thank you very much for having me.
Hey, everybody. I hope you enjoyed that time with Christian and I today. Living the whole life success, that's really what I took from our segment today. How are you living your whole life success? You heard us talk about boundaries and talked about finding things that bring you joy. And oftentimes, you, the listener, are sitting on the other side going, that's great stuff, but how do I do that? Where do I start? And I wanted to spend a couple minutes with you just to give you some tips and some things you can start doing. And the first one really is that joy list. Now, the joy list is really like sitting down when you work with me and we coach together. I have you do 10 things. Like we really talk about what are the 10 things that bring you joy. And the reason why I said it takes about 6 weeks is we're really going to delve into each one of those 10 things about what about that thing brings you joy. Because sometimes we think that getting our haircut, for instance, brings us joy, but maybe you dread getting your haircut. Maybe you don't like going to get your haircut. Maybe you don't like having conversations with your hairstylist, and that's okay. So maybe you write that down, but really when we delve into it, it's not really the thing that brings you joy. So then we talk about, so getting your haircut, how can we make that joyful for you? Maybe it's not going to the stylist that's, the higher end. Maybe it's something simple like a barber, like, I kind of touched on. Those are things that I want you to understand, that having that joy list is so important because it gives you the opportunity to start working on those areas of your life. So if today from the show, you're thinking, how do I live my whole life success? What I would encourage you to do is to write down 3 things that bring you joy. Just think about those 3 things. And then as you write each one, before you go to the next one, what I want you to ask yourself is, what about that really brings me joy? Like, why does that item, why does that taking a bubble bath, why does that getting a haircut, why is that sitting on the front porch swing, why does that bring you joy? And when you answer that, ask the question again, well, what about that brings you joy? Maybe like me, I love sitting in my front porch swing because it gives me time to journal. Okay, but what about journaling brings me joy? About journaling brings me joy is that it gives me opportunity to release some things that might be weighing me down on my mind. It also might be the opportunity to recognize the things that I've worked on that was a success. And also it gives me time to just have some quietness in my life before the day gets busy. So what I would encourage you to do is, if you're listening to our show today, first of all, I want to thank you so much for being part of our Self-Care Shiro podcast. I want to ask you to like and follow the show and share it with your friends, share it with your best girlfriend. But most of all, what I would love to see you do is to write 3 things today that bring you joy and really think about what they are, and then decide to pick one of those things to work on for the next 30 days. And come back and comment in the show comments about how that was for you. How did that feel? But if you feel like you need help with that and you want to learn more on how to work on your joy list, I would love to share some time with you. And all you have to do is comment back below with joy, or you can email the word joy to pearl@wsliving.com. That's pearl@wsliving.com. Or click in the show notes the link to book a time on our mini coaching session. So I just want to thank you guys for being part of our show and for listening. And I hope you go out today and I hope you find your inner pearl, as I said, but I hope you start working on your joy list today. Have a great day.